What's up, guys? I decided I'm gonna do my lesson today inside. It's kind of windy outside and I don't want you to hear like all the blowing around. So stay tuned. We are going to talk about the synapse. That's a very synaptic vibe, right? I would think so. Guys, welcome to April 6th. That would be Monday. And we are going to be talking about the synapse. So we talked about our neuron, we talked about our action potential, going all the way down. Now we're going to look at what happens after that action potential has gone through the neuron and it got to our terminal branch, the axon terminal. So if we look over here, I have a neuron that is going to be highlighted here and another neuron that is over there, right? So I'm going to draw two neurons. Here's a picture of one. And then I'll draw you a picture of another one. Okay, so there's some things we need to know about this. If this neuron over here is going to be stimulating the next neuron, we have this called the Pre-Synaptic Neuron. And if that presynaptic neuron is releasing neurotransmitter into that synapse, which I'll talk about in a minute, that space, and exciting the next neuron, the one that is getting excited is called the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so I'll be using those terms today, and I just want to make sure you understand what those are. Presynaptic releases the neurotransmitter. Postsynaptic is going to get stimulated by that neurotransmitter. All right, so the synapse, what is it? Synapse. Should remember from living environment or AP Bio, this is just the space between the neuron. Right? So they're typically not connected to one another. However, that is not always the case, as in my picture that I have here, which is a great picture. Sometimes neurons can be connected. So we have two different types of synapses, or two different types of, I don't know how we say it, how we stimulate other neurons. We have electrical and chemical. In electrical connections, the neurons are connected together. So if you took living environment, we always said there was a space. In this situation, there's not, and there's a reason for it. You should be able to think about it. You should probably press pause and think for a minute. Why would I have direct connections between neurons? So if we think about a great example, the heart, right? With the heart muscle, you have direct connections to the muscle. And then the muscle has those intercalated discs, which makes them connected to each other. So you can have heartbeat in unison. You don't have to worry about one piece beating and then another piece beating. You want it all beating together. Now there are issues that happen and all that. We're not talking about any of those. So that would be an example of an electrical connection. The brain has neurons connected to one another because information is flowing in at such a high rate. We want to make sure that it gets to where it's got to go fast and you don't have to release a neurotransmitter and then it has to get into a receptor, because then it would be very difficult. Your eyes also have electrical connections in them. Electrical synapses. And with that, what you have here is if I'm drawing a neuron and I draw the terminal branch or the axon terminal, whatever you guys want to call it, we have gap junctions. And remember we talked about gap junctions when we were talking about tissues? And so these gap junctions have them right together. So that action potential can go right through, right to the next one. It's very fast. Now the nervous system is fast to begin with, but that's an extremely fast way. But that isn't typical. That is atypical, and that is only in what I just gave you. You have that in the heart, you have that in the eyes, and you have that in your brain. The chemical ones, that's the one I'm focusing on. This is going to be throughout the rest of the body. And here we have a space, and we have neurotransmitter, transmitter, released in a chemical synapse. All right, so let's look at that. We're going to draw that, and we're going to write about how we accomplish the chemical synapse. So I'm going to jump down over here, and by the way, here is an example of the chemical synapse right there, and that's similar to what I'm going to draw, and we're going to need to know the steps in the process, but it's not a lot. We're going to be done pretty quickly. Alrighty, so we're going to draw this here. This is my axon. There's my axon terminal. Sometimes it's called the synaptic bulb. A lot of different terms for things here. Alright, so we have our action potential going on down. Action potential, AP. So I'm gonna, AP is the action potential. So what happened there? We had our stimulus, gated sodium channels open, brought it to threshold. You had your voltage gated sodium channels open, brought it up to our plus 30 millivolts. Then you had the potassium voltage gated channels open, and we brought ourselves back down. And we have this propagating throughout the neuron. Well, once it reaches that axon terminal, the change in membrane potential causes a new channel to open. And we're going to call this one a voltage gated calcium channel. Think about how important calcium is. When we were talking about the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and you had your calcium coming out and causing the muscle contractions. Now here we have voltage gated calcium channels, and that calcium is going to go in. And we have these circles, and these circles inside of the axon terminal, these are called vesicles. These vesicles, they contain neurotransmitter. What kind of neurotransmitter? Is it acetylcholine? Is it dopamine? Is it serotonin? That's for tomorrow. Anyhow, so we have these vesicles over here, and they contain neurotransmitter. Now you should be thinking to yourself, okay, so the calcium is going to come on in. Calcium is coming in. We'll call calcium, we'll give it like a triangular shape. There's our calcium, it's hanging out. Of course, you're going to have a calcium receptor on the vesicle, and once that calcium gets into that receptor, you have exocytosis of the vesicle. That vesicle opens up, the neurotransmitter just goes right into the synapse and then stimulates that next neuron. So we have these calcium receptors, and then you will have exocytosis of the vesicle, which will release neurotransmitter into the synapse. All right, so we're going to put the steps down, and then I'll go over it one more time, and that's going to be that. The important things here is you just understand the diagram and then the flow. So, step 1, action potential. I should have abbreviated that. That changes the neuron's membrane potential, right? We're going to bring it positive. We are going to depolarize it. Step 2, that change in the membrane potential causes calcium, voltage-gated calcium channels, gated calcium channels, I'm abbreviating calcium, to open, and calcium goes into the axon terminal, or the terminal branch, or the synaptic bulb. There's like a French word for it too. I think it is. I don't know. There's a million words for the same thing. It's biology. All right, step 3. Calcium binds to calcium receptors on the vesicle. Spelling vesicle wrong. That binding causes the vesicle, causes exocytosis of the vesicle. And then if that vesicle breaks open, what's going to happen? Neurotransmitter is released. Right? And so what could that do? That could cause another action potential in another neuron. That could cause a effector to be stimulated. In other words, you're going to move a muscle. It could open more potassium channel. I mean, it could do a whole slew of things here. All right, so one more time, we'll take a look at this diagram. You have your action potential. Your voltage-gated calcium channel is open. Calcium goes into the neuron or the synaptic bulb, which then binds to the vesicle's calcium receptors. The vesicle opens, there's exocytosis, and the neurotransmitter is then released into the synapse. And then it will then bind to the next neuron that has those particular receptors. In the next lesson, we're going to look at different neurotransmitters. So we'll have things like dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, and then we'll even look at a little bit of drugs and how that could affect the neurons. Have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow. I hope that made sense for you, and I hope you have a great Monday, and keep practicing, as Dr. Faccio says, that social distancing. Peace.